Hi, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today with you. My name is Eva Lopez, and I'm a representative of Safer Internet France. And particularly, I'm representing today Internet Without Fear, which is the national awareness program focusing on educational initiatives together with the Ministry of Education. For today's focus, I'm going to be sharing with you insights of France's regulatory and educational initiatives. What are the national debates that have been happening in France? But most importantly, what are the digital contexts or the digital issues that have been transforming these national debates? To begin, I want to first just introduce who we are at Safer Internet France. We work closely with the InSafe network, which is financed by the European Commission, with our colleagues at the Poland Safer Internet Center, and we work together to represent the interests nationally in France and alongside European initiatives. Safer Internet France is coordinated by Tralala, which is the organization who is also who I work for and who is the coordinator of Internet Without Fear. We're three services that are brought together for the protection of minors on the internet. We have the awareness program, which is what I'm representing, and we work together very closely with the Ministry of Education to create different types of educational content and also organizing the Safer Internet Day that happens annually every February. We have our partner e-Enfance 3018, who's the helpline, and then Point de Contact, who's the hotline, the reporting platform. Very quickly about the Internet Sans Compte. As I mentioned, we're the national program to raise awareness amongst young people, families, and educators about digital technologies, and it's supported by the European Commission. We've been coordinating this for the last 18 years, building trust on the ground with both institutions, but also families, parents, and young people. And each year we reach 1.2 million young people each year with 350,000 visitors per year on our site, where they access over 200 educational resources. And then we train 10,000 educational professionals each year. Together, what's very important for us is working and building trust with institutions. And earlier last year, we were part of the member of the President Macron's Screen Commission, which was an initiative led by the president for the first 6 months in 2024 to understand what are the developmental effects of screens on young people, to have an actual guide in terms of how should we handle introduction to screens to young people, and also have evidence-based instruction in terms of what are the developmental effects on introducing screens early to young people. So today's presentation, I really want to talk about the challenges that we see not only in France, but that's not unique just to France, but that we see across Europe, that are influencing national debates, but most importantly, the regulatory frameworks that we see, and then leading to the conversation about education. So the first part of this conversation is about children's digital exposure, which is something that we have been discussing this morning. I think that we're quite aware now that this isn't something that's unique in France, that children are immersed in digital life from an early age, that childhood today the digital environment is part of childhood. Looking at some of the statistics that I wanted to highlight in France is that 98% of children aged 8 to 11 have access to at least one screen at home. 63% of children are under 13. They have a personal account on social network, despite the digital majority age being under the digital majority age. And then most importantly is that 82% of parents are concerned about their children's use of the internet. And I think that when I discuss about the national debate and also the responses, it echoes some of the discussion that we heard earlier this morning from Jessica's presentation. I want to highlight that with parents, the concern is about management and having support in terms of how to manage the screen time and also the rise of new digital technologies. The second The second point that I want to mention is about the digital environment that children are being exposed to, and that is the increase of incidents of cyber harassment. So in France, and I don't think this is unique just to France alone, but cyberbullying has become a common experience for young people, which often takes place within peer groups, and is also amplified by the fact that most young people use their real identities online. So the statistics I wanted to highlight is that 1 in 2 children are affected by cyber violence. 23% of young people between 8 to 19 have been a victim of cyber harassment. 40% of them were harassed in a WhatsApp group with people that they have either known, whether it was schools or other peers that they're associated with. And the other point that I want to mention is that 36% of the cyberbullies are doing it for fun. And this point is something that when we talk about the educational response, what we need to look at as well is the educational response of social emotional learning. We need to understand why is it happening in the first place, but we also need to understand how to support both the victim and the perpetrator in terms of developing empathy. So there's an emphasis on social emotional learning in education. The third point that I want to mention in terms of what's shaping national debate in France is the issue relating to sharing and the family influencer economy. So first I want to start with the statistics because I highlight 2 different sets of statistics here. The first is about just sharing in its own without any economic influence. So 53%, more than half of parents shared their children online. 91% of those parents did so before their child reached the age of 5. 50% of those photos that were shared made it on pedocriminal forums, and these are the photos that had been initially shared by their parents. So these first set of statistics really is more about the notion of sharing with good intention, sharing photos online, but without thinking of the consequences or even the responsibility or the impact that it might be having on their children. The other set of statistics I want to discuss is about the rise of the family influencer economy. So 70% of parent influencers in France today are earning up to 5,000 euros a month from brand deals, and 1.1% of French parents of under 16s are now influencers. So that's approximately 3,875 parent influencers out of 150,000 influencers in France. So why do I share these? I shared these 3 main issues, although there are others that I could have discussed, but the 3 ones that I wanted to talk about was digital exposure, cyber violence, and sharing, because it's really the ones that are transforming today's regulatory responses and the national debate. So the first part of this national debate is a question of labor that goes back to both child influencers and sharing. And this is about what does it mean to be a child influencer? And since 2018 and 2019, French media has been covering the rapid rise of YouTube families. So this includes unboxing toys, giving reviews of, children giving reviews of how they feel about the toys, and then these examples in parliamentary debates have included the question in terms of what does this mean in terms of child labor. The result is really raising questions about hidden child labor and missing safeguards on working hours, and leading to a new legal framework called the Child Influencer Law, which is also known as the Stutter Law. And the focus of this law is really applicable to children who are working significant hours online and generating income through content. And what this law really emphasized was that there should be similar regulations or protections for children, the same way that they have regulations and safeguards for child actors, for example. So for this, there's an earnings safeguard that comes with it. For example, income placed in protected bank account, accessible only when a child turns 16. But most importantly is the right to be forgotten. The child is provided with more rights to remove content at their own request. So this shifts the responsibility, parent and corporate responsibility, where companies and employers need to have official authorization from local authorities to contract child influencers, and it provides our regulator, ARCM, to monitor platforms' obligations to remove content at a child's request, ensuring companies respect restrictions on the commercial use of minors' image. This is a quite important law that happened in France, where it really treats young content creators as child performers, ensuring that their earnings are protected and their rights and dignity are protected in the digital age. The second part of the national debate, or that it comes back to a question of consent related around parenting. So a little bit differently to the national debate when it came to child influencers, was more about media highlighting the extreme cases of parents monetizing children's image on Instagram and TikTok without their consent. There's also a national debate on the commercialization of childhood. And there were testimonies and surveys that were collected by our data authority organization, CNL, that included young adults stating that their digital identity was shaped by parental oversharing before they had a say. This debate raised questions about children's privacy concerns and their own right to erasure, leading to the next legal framework, which is the Children's Image Rights Law, which is created, that transformed the child influencer law. It strengthened children's right to privacy and their images, and furthermore affirmed their digital rights. Children have a right of access, erasure, and objection over the images and data that's shared by them, shared by their parents. So the right to erasure that was created with the child influencer law in 2020 was strengthened, where now children can request deletion of photos and videos from social networks, and platforms must act within 1 month of this request. So the data authority, CNL, their enforcement power was strengthened, and they can bring urgent proceedings to force compliance. So this law, coupled with the child influencer law, shifts responsibility onto parents and platforms, making children's privacy and image rights legally enforceable, with stronger powers for the Data Protection Authority to act swiftly. Now, one conversation that has been transforming constantly is the national debate on age verification. So I had mentioned earlier the question of digital exposure, or the fact that today the majority of young people are online. And I had also mentioned a statistic that despite the service terms, there's early social media usage. The other issues that are pointed out in the national debate is spurred on the question of mental health concerns that was evidenced by President Macron's Screen Commission and a quite recently released parliamentary TikTok report. This report was actually released about a little over a week ago. It was an investigation that was done by our parliament on TikTok, where they found evidence regarding how the algorithm is influencing young people psychologically. Furthermore, the parental advocacy cases that were brought forward to parliamentary hearings had also brought awareness to how children were being exposed to grooming based on their social media, the digital environment and social media. But I want to jump a little bit ahead to a legal test case that really accelerated the question of age verification and what can be done in the regulatory space. And it is actually related to a case study with ARCM suing several porn platforms in 2023 for failing to implement age checks. And I'm going to go back to my notes very quickly because I want to share this case very detailed with you. So just 1 second. So, basically, and this part is very important to the conversation about age verification in France, but since 1994, it's been a criminal offense to expose minors to pornographic content. I think that this is something that we see in every other country. But in 2020, ARCOM was given the power to serve notices to non-compliant sites. Basically, do you have actual robust age verifications to making sure that young people can't access these sites? And by 2023, it began issuing formal notices, and some cases even blocking sites from being in France. So there was a new law in 2024 that went a step further called the Sarin Law, and it empowered ARCOM to administratively block or delist sites under judicial oversight. And it also required ARCOM, in consultation with our data authority, CNL, to adopt a technical reference framework for age verification systems. So it created a path for financial penalties if platforms failed to comply. And by the middle of this year, this has been actively enforced, where ARCOM has issued formal notices to 5 major pornographic sites in the EU accessible from France, and after finding no effective age checks. So following the notices, all implemented verification measures, and one site even reinstated its suspended system after ARCOM's warning. So the reason I shared this test case is because this case showed in France that technical solutions do exist when we're talking about age verifications. Accountability can also exist as well. And in the case of France, the regulators were prepared to use them and showed that industry can adapt under pressure. It also created a really important precedent in France in the conversation about age verifications for social media. And it really followed as this: if pornography platforms can be required to implement robust age checks, then perhaps the same expectation can apply to social media platforms where children are also at risk. And that's the link and why social media debate increased. I lost my clicker. There it is. So the debates here raised also questions about feasibility, effectiveness, and rights trade-off as well. And I also just want to make a quick point that although there were age verification and technical solutions for pornography sites, I think that we also need to make a distinction as well between the different types of harms. And I think that was echoed too in terms of that there is no one-size-fits-all regulatory framework as well. But I want to now go to France's legal framework in terms of age verification and social media. And the most important one of this is the Digital Age and Majority Law, which was adopted in 2023. And the focus of this law is establishing a digital age of majority, which is 15 in France, and it requires parental consent for minors under 15 to open social media accounts. For this, it was, again, to have digital rights affirmed and protect children's right to privacy, dignity, and balanced development in the digital sphere. And then there's a parental consent mechanism that was attached to this law where platforms must verify age and obtain parental approval for under 15s, and failure can comply to trigger fines. But this was a little bit complicated in terms of actually implementing this, where there was a conflict between France's national ambitions and then, of course, with the European Digital Service Act, where the issue really goes, where it became an issue of actually implementing the age verification, mainly because of the single market with the Digital Service Act. Platforms had brought basically, the concern was that in order for them to have this age verification in a single market with the Digital Service Act, there would not be a harmonization in terms of what the digital age looks like across the EU, which made it very difficult for France to actually implement this age verification. But some aspects that come along for this is the enforcement powers that it does give to ARCOM and the Data Authority Protection, CNL, to oversee compliance. And also, as we work together with the European Commission with the Digital Service Act, we've also received trusted flagger status, e-enfance and point de contact, who are now working closely with ARCOM to identify and escalate harmful or illegal content. And I also want to mention that something that is moving forward with the Digital Service Act is that France is going to be one of 5 countries that is going to be implementing or testing the first age verification tool that's being created by the European Commission. And the idea there is to see if there can be something, a harmonized digital majority or a harmonized tool for age verification in the EU. So just to recap, in terms of major advances in regulation in France, we have the case study of age verification on pornography websites with penalties for those who do not comply. And for that, that really showed, okay, here a technical solution that can exist, and it really is accelerating the debate in terms of what's possible with the age verification for social media. And then the two important reports that I want to highlight again is President Macron's Screen Commission. And this one is incredibly important in the sense that this report really was specific towards screen time and how to help families manage screen time and also understand the developmental risks to it. And at that time, in 2024, France wasn't really leaning towards a ban for social media. It was really a conversation about regulation and how to create a digital majority and also understanding how to introduce incrementally screens to young people and also how to balance regulation with education. But in recent years, this debate has evolved into something that is more of an escalation towards a ban of social media. And I want to bring up again the TikTok report that came out a week ago. If you're interested in reading more, I absolutely recommend looking into it. But essentially, there was a parliamentary investigation of TikTok and whether or not the algorithms were actually affecting young people mentally and psychologically, which the report is very strong in their finding or their conviction. The word that they use is TikTok is a poison to young people. And so from this report, they actually created 48 recommendations. And the main two that I want to highlight is first that it calls for a complete ban for social media for everyone underneath 15. The second aspect, actually there are three. The second aspect that I want to mention is that although this report was about TikTok, in the recommendations, this ban is referring to all social media, not just specifically TikTok, even though this is what the report investigated. So this, I think, also echoes some of the elements or themes that we heard today about how a lot of regulatory responses is very much in terms of social media as a whole without making any distinction between the different platforms and how they operate. And the third that I think is really important to highlight in this recommendation is this notion of parental negligence. And if you read the report, you'll see that one of the framing of this parental negligence is really putting the onus onto parents having the responsibility of making sure that young people don't access social media and also punishing parents if they actually access social media. For example, one of the recommendations is potentially a two-year sentence in prison and also a 30,000 euro fine, which for me really puts the onus onto the parent and takes away the responsibility of the platforms. And this is not something that we should be advocating towards, and it's not something that we should be moving towards. But going back, finally, we have a lot of strong mobilization by our Minister of Digital Affairs in terms of working together with the European Union to understand how to create a more harmonized digital majority, working on this issue. And part of Safer Internet France is that we've been part of these discussions, really trying to advocate more for a regulatory response that also works side by side with education and not leaning towards a ban and certainly not leaning towards this notion of parental negligence. And so it brings me into the other part of my presentation, which is about educational initiatives, which I think plays an important piece, and I think that we heard it also earlier today, that regulation alone is not what's going to be solving any of these issues. And I really want to state here that online protection means accountable platforms, an education that gives all of us the skills to navigate safely and confidently. I don't think I'm saying anything really innovative here when I state this, but I think that when we see, for example, statistics where parents are saying 83%, for example, of parents are saying that they cannot manage what's happening online or even support young people, I don't think that what they're asking for is a ban for something. They're asking for support. And most importantly, when I think it was also stated earlier this morning, that let's say that there is a ban of social media for people who are young people under 15. The question then is, what happens when they're 16, and how can you provide education for something that you do not have access for? It seems kind of at odds with each other. So I want to highlight now what are the educational initiatives that we've been leading here in France in support of regulatory frameworks and in support with French institutions. The first is with Internet Without Fear, the Safer Internet France's Awareness Center is protecting young people and also supporting families, emphasizing a shared responsibility in doing this. And so in response to the challenges of the digital age, whether it's cyberbullying, the need for media literacy, training on AI, we offer 200 resources and also turnkey programs to raise awareness among both young people, parents, and professionals through both prevention, training, and support-based approaches. And these are just some highlights of some of the programs that we've been working on. But what's important for us is that we provide free resources to everyone that can be used within classrooms, but also at home. That resources that come with pedagogical guides where we provide trainings for teachers as well to how to have conversations, for example, about supporting young people with cyberbullying, and also training teachers in terms of what does ethical AI or digital responsibility look like, so that they feel empowered as well to be able to have these conversations and trainings with their students. But we also provide these workshops and trainings to parents as well. And the most important aspect that we really work towards is building dialogue between young people and their parents. So for example, we have a program called Faminum, which is actually about creating dialogue between parents and their kids at home in terms of how to manage their screen time, but also understanding, having discussions in terms of violence online and addictive practices. So for us also, it's about how do you create dialogue as much as it's about training and providing support to the adults who are working with young people. The other aspect that's important in terms of as we're having these regulatory responses is how do we collaborate with French institutions and our governments as well to make sure that the educational perspectives but also advocacy-based perspectives are being integrated into the regulatory frameworks. So we work really closely with our Ministry of Health, and they're a partner of ours for National Digital Parenting Platform. We also work really closely with the Digital General for Social Cohesion, where we speak with parents about digital education. We work very closely as well with the Ministry of Digital Affairs on joint actions on platform regulatory issues. And our strongest partner is with the Ministry of Education, who is a key partner in the distribution of our services and resources nationally. And together we work together with them for No to Bullying and also the Safer Internet Day, which has been included in the French school national agenda. And I just wanted to highlight the Safer Internet Day in France, which I know is also, for us for this year, we really worked to align ourselves with the the European Year of Digital Citizenship and also AI. And the reason why we chose both of those thematics for the Safer Internet Day of this year was that in Paris earlier this year, there was the AI in Action Summit that took place in Paris, which of course AI being a conversation that everyone's talking about, but we really wanted to align in terms of two thematics: digital responsibility in the sense of what does it look like to be a responsible citizen online, which is not necessarily different in your everyday, and also what does it look to use AI ethically and how do you use that responsibly. So This year, we organized thousands of workshops using awareness-raising tools that were actually created with young people. And I want to emphasize this point. One of the best practices that we have in the InSafe network and the other Safer Internet centers is that we really focus in terms of how do we make sure that young people are actively involved in the creation of these educational resources, but also informing us in terms of what are their needs and what are the issues. Almost all Safer Internet centers have a youth panel who are actively working with them. And for us, all of the digital educational programs that we're working on are created together with experts and also youth. So we created a new resource for digital citizenship and AI that was actually completely youth-led. And there were 30-plus digital learning pathways on AI education this year that was completed, and over 500,000 young people reached with these resources. And this is also a huge success because of the collaboration that we have with the Ministry of Education. And I want to conclude with a couple of just dissemination and impact points. Our national partnership with the Ministry of Education, or this notion of being able to work together both with public institutions but even private institutions, is incredibly important in this conversation about this combination of regulation and also education. And through this partnership with the Ministry of Education, we're able to reach that statistic that I had mentioned earlier this year, where we are able to touch over 1 million young people every year. We also think that it's incredibly important to be able to reach educators on the ground, and so we've created an ambassador of 85 plus different ambassadors who are experts in education, who are a part of civil society, who actually go to schools across France to deliver these these awareness programs and digital education programs. And the other aspect that's really important in all of this is having extensive outreach to parents. So we partner with different parents associations and reach more than 100,000 parents each year. And finally, it's about providing professional support and training to teachers. So our resources have reached about 6,000 professionals each year. And the core of this is really, how do we make sure that everyone who's working together with young people, but even young people themselves, are feeling digitally confident and feel as though that they can have conversations related to the issues that are affecting them, but also being part of the solution. So thank you so much. I hope that we can work together in terms of discussing this issue more, and thank you for your time.